Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Cioffi here. Friday, the end of the week, kind of a recovery day. I was debating about kind of taking the night off a little bit, so then I said, you know what, got to do a live stream. And welcome everybody. You got to see what I was going through yesterday with the heavy snow. I got 16 inches at my house in central Long Island, and where I work in southeastern Westchester County, just east of White Plains. We had about a foot of snow here. It was really, really interesting watching that whiteout that I saw yesterday. I kind of went out just to sort of take an observation, and then just noticed that I couldn't see anything. And by the way, the building I work in is a white building. So as some of my colleagues were telling me as they were driving into work, they couldn't even find the turnoff because our building is set back in the woods a bit off the main road, and they couldn't even see the turnoff because they couldn't see the building. So it was just an amazing day. The snow rates were phenomenal, and yes, Cynthia Guignatis, I'm exhausted, but not as tired as I've been with other storms. I'm not quite. I don't know why that is the case. Usually I am pretty mentally wiped out, and I kind of had a mental moment yesterday in the evening, but I've been getting sleep, and I think that makes a big difference. So we're headed into a weekend. Fallen Angel, I don't know what the total amounts were up in the Hudson Valley. I'll have to check on that. But for Long Island and for coastal New Jersey, did exceptionally well with this snow-wise. 12 to 18 inches fell in that whole stretch from Cape May all the way up into Long Island and southern parts of Connecticut, southern and eastern Connecticut, a foot plus. You go back, the 1 foot line probably ran through eastern parts of New York City, and from there, amounts started to tail off just a little bit. But there were these sharp dividing lines going westward. So once you got to the New Jersey border, then you were talking maybe a couple of inches. And of course, much further west of that, Philadelphia, I think in Philadelphia itself got 4 inches. But I noticed that there were a number of 4 to 6 inch measurements in the area. There was a lot of banding that went on, where you get these bands that form, these north-south bands. So if you were on either side of those bands, you got several inches less than you did if you were on the inside. And by the way, where I live in central Long Island, it's like a little bit of a snow belt that runs from Smithtown, Brookhaven. If you ever look at the town map of Long Island, it's kind of in central Suffolk County and extends to just west of Riverhead. And there's kind of a snow belt in there, and once again, that snow belt lived up to expectations because we wound up with a few extra inches than everybody else did. Some of that has to do with the topography. Some of that has to do with the fact that you get a wind with a long fetch off Long Island Sound, and that kind of tends to enhance snowfall where I am. There's some elevation near me. There's a bit of a spine that goes up to about 440 feet, and it's a small difference, but it does make a difference. Okay, so let's look forward to the weekend, and we naturally are dealing with now the last of these Arctic air masses and the brutal cold. I want to show you a couple of things going forward, and I promise I'm going to clean up this board before too long because it's just gotten out of control. With all the extra maps that I have up here. But one of the things I want to show you going forward with respect to the teleconnections, because we are going to see a pattern change. Now, where we're going with this pattern change is another matter. I know that there are people out there in the land of the long range that apparently have the next 6 weeks all figured out, and I would just humbly suggest that you might wind up with an outcome that's a little different than what you think. And here's the reality: when you're in an Arctic, any kind of pattern, whether it's an Arctic pattern or whether it's a very warm pattern, when it's in a position where it's producing extremes, you can't really stay in that pattern forever. the atmosphere is going to have to snap back and reload. And I think that may be what we will be seeing over the next couple of weeks, is basically a snapback in the upper air pattern. And we can see that, by the way, with what these teleconnections are telling us. The P&A index is getting rather volatile here. It's going to crash negative as we go into the January 9th through the 11th. And then it's going to spike up strongly positive later next week, only to crash negative again. So I would look for the points where you're getting these crashes, is where there might be, the potential for some precipitation event somewhere, and we are going to get a minor one in the east, because the other elements here aren't really coming together, and also, even though we're going to have a strong P&A positive Pacific North America pattern, a strong ridge being indicated up in the west, it's not going to play out to any major storm development here in the eastern states, because with respect to the cold air, we can now see what's happening with the EPO. And while the EPO is sort of dancing around that negative line for the next week or so, it is then forecast to go positive. So this positive EPO would be perhaps pointing to some kind of warmer pattern in the eastern states as we move into the middle part of the month. Now, naturally, we don't know what's going to go on beyond that. Looks like it peaks out and then starts a downtrend. But bottom line is, this should not be any big surprise. You can't have those extremes, that extreme pattern with the Arctic pattern with the negative EPO. It's got to break, and that's where we're headed, I think. But I also will tell you that you might get some surprises happening along the way, and they may come in ways that you might not think of. And one of the things I was telling one of my colleagues today is that last year we spent all of last winter in basically not a good pattern for winter weather, yet it seemed like the few times that the pattern did set up, it set up in a very positive way for short periods of time. It got cold when it was important enough for it to get cold, and when there was storm activity that had to be dealt with. I'm going to go to the models now, and I want to show you the new GFS, because it'll take us through what will happen here with respect to the Arctic air that's currently coming in now. You can see how tight the pressure gradient is in the east. We have this 960 low sitting halfway between New Brunswick and western Newfoundland now. This is the big storm that went up the coast yesterday. The gradient extremely tight at 1040 millibar high in northern Minnesota, and all this cold air pouring straight down into the eastern part of the United States. So the next 48 hours will be the coldest until the gradient starts to relax, which it looks like it may not do until later Sunday. We may stay windy right into Sunday morning, and then the high moves to the coast and moves to the Carolinas. So that's going to start a return flow, and it's going to try to warm up. The response the atmosphere will do with that warmer air is probably force it aloft, and we'll get some high clouds. And there is a front that's moving out of the Great Lakes and into western New York. It's a weak one. There'll be an area of snow through northeastern Minnesota and through the northern Great Lakes on Sunday. And you can also see an area of rain. There's a southern feature here that's going to be separating from from the northern stream, and just basically get left behind somewhere. It's not going to have any kind of impact on the weather in the east. So it really will be whatever moisture we have ahead of this this cold front that'll be moving on through. And it does produce a little bit of light snow and freezing precipitation across the northeast on later Monday into Monday night, while there's some rain that moves into the northeastern Gulf of Mexico with that remnant low that drops down into the Gulf. Again, no mechanism to bring it up the East Coast. One of the things we're going to have to watch for in the Northeast, particularly in the areas around the coast, southern New England, Long Island, into New Jersey, and southeastern Pennsylvania, The bitter cold air is going to leave the ground very, very cold. And while the temperatures may try and go above freezing, they're going to have a bit of a struggle. We've got this deep snow cover to fight through. And we are not really dealing with a south wind here. This is going to be more of a light west or west-southwest wind. That is not a wind that warms you up all that quick this time of year. So one of the things that you might see is if you wind up warming it in the upper layers of the atmosphere where the precipitation falls as rain, you could wind up with a situation where the air temperature is above 32, but the ground being so cold for so long now that it may take several to many hours for the ground and surfaces, exposed surfaces outside, to warm up above freezing. And you could have icing. I can remember instances like this where I am, where we had freezing rain and temperatures in the upper 30s to near 40 because the air was so bitter ahead of it, and the warm up happened too fast, and the ground just didn't catch up fast enough. So that's something we're going to have to consider. Now, once that's done, we do have a little shot of slightly colder air, but that quickly goes out as the models are bringing out low pressure into the Great Lakes with a weather front. Now, later next week, probably Thursday into Friday, I think that's where we could see temperatures climbing up well into the 40s, maybe even getting to 50 at some point. But you'll notice that the models are bringing down a high into Minnesota, kind of wedging it across the Great Lakes and into New England, and there's this front that's going to come through and probably stall out, and some kind of wave is going to develop on it. And one of the things we're going to watch for is how this high kind of presents itself when it goes up into Canada. Does it press down some cold air in the east? And I think that that's a possibility for the end of next week and into the weekend of January 13th, 14th. So even if the overall upper air pattern is not going to be overly favorable, you're only going to have a limited amount of cold air. There are ways for for you to see wintry precipitation. And then as we move beyond on this particular run, for some reason the upper air looked to be a little bit colder than one of the prior runs, but that may be just a temporary thing. When we take a look on the North America view, I'll put up the jet stream, and one of the things that the model seems to keep being persistent on is the fact that in the longer term, as we go through, here we are now, now we're into the end of January 20th, 21st, it looks like it wants to, at least at this point, go to a ridge in the east and general troughing in the west. I would just suggest that while this may be the case, I would be very careful in concluding that this is going to be something that's going to last right through the rest of the winter. I've already seen stuff like that, people saying that. And look, I'm going to suggest the following. It's been my experience. It's not that it can't change to that and stay that way for the rest of the winter. It certainly can, but more often than not, what happens is that whatever the primary pattern is, which I think is what we just came out of, it started probably, if you want to make an argument, it really started sometime during November and peaked with what we just saw at the end of December and so far for the beginning of January. Whatever the primary pattern is, it oftentimes takes a break and then snaps back to that primary pattern. And maybe we'll have to wait toward the end of January or the beginning of February for that to happen. I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. I know some people are pointing to the Madden-Julian oscillation, a tropical activity that goes on in the Indian Ocean and in the West Pacific. We're right now going into a phase that is not favorable for cold winter weather in the eastern part of the United States, and that may very well be the case. But I've also been told that the phase that it's going into is a rather volatile one and tends to flip out of it from time to time. So don't draw any conclusions out of this. If there's anything you've picked up over the last number of weeks, if in terms of what we've seen happen, we wound up getting into a pattern that I don't think many of us expected back in November. I certainly did not think we would get. Well, when I say I didn't think we would get, it didn't even occur to me that we could get into a pattern that produced such extreme cold and now has also produced a blizzard. We've had 4 or 5 nickel and dime events snow-wise, and now we've had this blizzard along the East Coast. One that saw winter storm warnings get set up from Florida all the way up into Maine. Let me just say, by the way, that I know from the videos, I usually try very much to respond to comments on these live streams that eventually get posted. Some of you see these lives and some of you see these on the replays. I did go back today. I apologize. The last few days have been really busy and I have not been able to go back to respond to many of your comments, but I have done that now. So I did go back. I'm not finished yet. I got 2 more videos to do and go answer comments. But I do always like to make sure I get to everybody's questions. So I think I'm going to, at this point, I want to run through what you guys are saying. And yeah, my electric and gas bills, Tom Adams, yours are low. I burn a lot of firewood. So I keep my my oil bills to an absolute minimum by splitting my own firewood. And I actually split about 12 or 13 cords of wood back in 2012 and just stacked it in my backyard, and that's what I've been burning ever since, and I'm down to the last 2 cords. Michael Yarusi, thank you very much for hitting Super Chat tonight. I know a number of you have done that over the last couple of days. Thank you so much. A few of you have also, popped into my PayPal. Thank you for that too. I really appreciate it. Oh, and by the way, you know what? I'm going to put this up because, what are we if we're not entrepreneurial? Okay, but I did do something. Let me find it. Hang on. Where is it? Oh, I got to find that link. What did I do with that link? Oh, here we go. But just in case you want a little bit of a memory of the of yesterday's storm, I I put it on a mug for everybody. So you can check that out. Thank you very much, by the way. Again, Michael Yarusi, for hitting Super Chat. Dio Nankumar, no, right now I think we're going into a quiet mode. No major storms are on the horizon. And, that often happens when you have something like what we had yesterday. When the atmosphere got getting stretched to the extreme that it did, the rubber band has now snapped back somewhat. And as a result, we're going to probably see just some, relatively minor weather systems. There might be some that produce a little bit more than others, but no major storms are on the horizon. Who knows? Let me see. Southside Boxing. Who knows what time it is in Providence, Rhode Island? It's the same time it is here. It's 6:24 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And good to see you, Southside. I haven't seen you on board in a while. Colin, you got 3.5 inches, 10.5 for the season, and definitely below average temps. Now, there you are with that. And I've got, so far, of course, I got the below average temps, but I'm being down on the coast, and this is continuing a trend that has been the case pretty much for the last, I would say, 16 years. I'm at 26 inches for the season so far at my where I am, and almost got to my normal for the whole winter, which is just at 32. Southside Boxing, all is well with me and my family. Thank you. I had a great Christmas and New Year's, and I hope you did also. It's always great to see you here, and those of you that are watching from the UK. Always love the fact that you're here, and I'm going to get my DNA results back from the genealogy test that I did in a week or two, and we'll find out whether I've got some UK in my heart somewhere. Let's see. The pattern is breaking down because of greenhouse gas. Tom Adams said, okay, sure, I get the humor in it, though. Hoping for some nice rain here in Arkansas. We missed significant rains in the southern areas of the state received. You know what? Its pattern switch might give you some opportunities. You're going to have to see how this state stacks up with the La Nina pattern, but I think you might have a shot for some rain later next week with the way the weather fronts and where the trough is going to be going. So I got my fingers crossed for you. What else? Let me just see. I'm just running. Quality of sleep is better than quantity. I agree. You know, one of the things, Fallen Angel, what I do is I keep my room very cold. I actually keep the room temperature at 62, and I you know, sleep with like several blankets, 5 to be exact. And I have to tell you, I sleep very deeply. I get about 6 to 7 hours, and it's I cannot sleep when they're with the heat, and I don't know how people sleep with a room at 70 degrees. It is the most uncomfortable thing for me, and I just sleep so easily when the room is kept nice and cold. Pete Frizella, don't get too nervous about the warm-up for what's going on in the long range, because you know what, I continue to view weather with the idea that I stay inside that 2-week time frame, and I let the long range take care of itself. But I'm just kind of trying to stay focused inside the 2-week time frame and not think too much about what's beyond that, because the variability is wide. And by the way, I will tell you that I noticed yesterday, I just happened to pull up one of the climate models, and I did notice that one of them actually flipped colder for February, March, and April. Went from being above normal, which it was doing for quite a while, and suddenly, I saw that it has a normal to below normal temperatures for for the Northeast and back up into the Plains and Rockies for February, and then has pretty much everybody east of the Rockies below average for March. So those long range models can flip on you in a hurry for one reason or another. So that's why I kind of not really put too much weight in what they're doing. I'd rather look at what's going on in the short range and have fun with that. Where was I 15 years ago when my ex wanted the heat on at 72? Yeah, I don't know how you sleep with the heat running at night. My recommendation: keep it in the low 60s or mid 60s at most. Get yourself a couple of extra blankets. You will sleep like a baby in a situation like that. Billy Johnson, last major snowstorm before New Year's on Long Island was the day after Christmas was the Boxing Day blizzard in 2010, and the last major snowstorm before Christmas was in 2009. You are correct. And this one came right after New Year's. No, Corey, that's too warm. Sorry. Yeah, Jason, that's the other thing. You run in the heat a lot, it dries you out. You find it hard to speak. It completely dries you out. You're better off, just trust me. According to Joe Bastardi, William Huber, it going back to what we went through early in February, he did call for what we had back in November. He's also saying it's going to be a bad tornado season. Well, you know what? I just will say this. I mean, I don't follow Bastardi too closely. I do see what other people will post about him, and the general implication is that he is a cold weather snow fan. So I don't that might perhaps skew his view. I don't know, but I will agree to the point to in this way, in that the primary, as I said earlier, the primary pattern, I think, is what we've just seen, and not the anomaly. And in winters, many times you get the break, and then you go back to that primary pattern. And I'm going to suggest that we will go back to the primary pattern, maybe not to the extreme of what we saw, but perhaps less of an extreme, but it'll have the Jane, it'll rhyme, okay? That's what I would say, and it might, maybe, there might be something different about it. Perhaps the jet in the Pacific will open up and start shooting in some systems into California. I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head. Perhaps it might come with a more active storm track, a more active subtropical jet. We'll see. But I'm going to have fun watching the pattern evolve, because that's, you know, that's what I enjoy. All right, so you know what, folks, since there really isn't too much happening other than the cold, and I think we've kind of beaten that as much as we can with respect to that, but let's call it a day so I can get a bit of a break. I will once again, if you want to get a cyclone bomb coffee mug, go take a look. No one, of course, under any obligation. Thanks everybody for being here, and you know, I hope you got through the storm safely. We will be on over the weekend. I'm Sunday for sure. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to take a break tomorrow, but I'll let you know, because I'll post it on. I'll schedule my live stream, and we'll see. I do like to take a break every once in a while. Website posts are always there at meteorologistjoecioffi.com and nycweathernow.com, where my friend Angry Ben he takes care of that. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else going on. No, we're good. So with no major storms, we'll be back tomorrow. We'll see what the models tell us. We'll look at what may happen later Monday into Monday night, which looks like a minor event. Everybody stay warm in your travels tonight, Saturday, and Sunday, if you're where things are bitter and brutal, because we really do need to warm things up just a little bit. All right, folks, have a great evening and a great weekend. We'll hopefully talk to you tomorrow.